Title: The Last Leaf of Autumn by Wisdom Chronicles. In the small, picturesque village of Vaya, nestled between the undulating hills and meandering rivers of rural Russia, the crisp air of autumn was giving way to the chill of an early winter. The villagers, accustomed to the rhythmic change of seasons, went about their lives with a stoic acceptance of nature's course. Among them lived Igor Alexeyevich, an old, retired soldier whose life, much like the solitary oak tree in his yard, had withstood many a storm. Igor's days were simple and unvaried. He would rise with the sun, partake in a modest breakfast of black bread and tea, and then spend hours tending to his small garden or repairing things around his modest wooden house. The villagers respected Igor for his service in the wars of his youth and often sought his advice on matters both trivial and significant. On one particularly cold morning, as Igor was pruning the bushes by his fence, his attention was drawn to the last remaining leaf on the old oak tree. This stubborn leaf, refusing to succumb to the inevitability of the changing season, reminded Igor of himself, a relic of a bygone era, holding on with a mixture of pride and defiance. As Igor pondered over the leaf, his thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a young man, Mikhail Petrovich, from the neighboring village. Mikhail, a spirited and idealistic soul, was the antithesis of Igor in both age and disposition. He brought news of unrest in the cities, of ideas that were igniting the minds of the youth, of change that was sweeping across the country like a relentless wind. "Igor Alexeyevich," Mikhail began with a fervor in his voice, "the world is changing. The old ways are dying and a new era is dawning. It's an era of equality, freedom, and justice. You must join us in our fight. Your experience, your wisdom, it's invaluable." Igor listened patiently, his eyes drifting back to the lone leaf on the oak. "Mikhail," he replied with a calm, measured voice, "change, like the seasons, is inevitable. But not all change leads to a spring. Sometimes it leads to a harsher winter. One must weigh the cost of their actions, for ideals, however noble, can often lead to unintended consequences." Mikhail, unswayed by Igor's caution, spoke passionately about the plight of the workers in the cities, the injustices they suffered, and the bright future that awaited if they could overthrow the chains of their oppressors. Igor, however, remained unmoved. As days turned into weeks, the last leaf on the oak tree continued to cling on, despite the increasing cold and the winds that howled through the village. It became a symbol, a topic of discussion among the villagers. Some saw it as a sign of hope, others as a stubborn denial of the inevitable. Mikhail continued to visit Igor, each time with more news of the growing movement, of strikes, of marches, of speeches that stirred the souls of men. And each time Igor would listen, then point to the leaf and say, "When that leaf falls, then we shall see what the future holds." Winter was fast approaching, and the last leaf, now more brown than green, still clung to its branch. The village was abuzz with talk of a great demonstration in the city, one that would be the final push to bring about the change Mikhail so fervently believed in. On the eve of the demonstration, Mikhail visited Igor once more. "Igor Alexeyevich, tomorrow is the day we've been waiting for. We will make our stand. Will you not join us?" Igor, looking older and more tired than usual, simply shook his head. "I have seen many seasons, Mikhail. I have seen the zeal of youth and the regret of age. I have seen dreams built and lives shattered. Go if you must. But remember, every action leaves its mark, just as every leaf eventually falls and nourishes the ground for the next season." Mikhail left, disappointment etched on his face. Igor sat by his window, gazing at the oak tree and the last leaf which, against all odds, was still holding on. The next day, news arrived of the demonstration. It had started peacefully but had turned violent. There were casualties, arrests, and chaos. Igor felt a deep sense of sorrow, not just for the young souls caught in the turmoil, but for the cycle of hope and despair that seemed to perpetuate through the ages. As he stood by his window, lost in thought, a gentle breeze swept through the garden. It was then that the last leaf of the oak tree finally detached itself, twirling and dancing in the wind before it landed softly on the ground. Igor picked up the leaf, its edges brittle, its colour faded. He thought about Mikhail, the fervor in his eyes, the certainty in his voice. He thought about the cycles of nature, the inevitability of change, and the cost of ideals. With a heavy heart, Igor walked back into his house, the leaf in his hand a reminder of the relentless passage of time and the transient nature of all things. In the days that followed, the village slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Mikhail did not return, and his fate remained unknown to Igor. The old soldier spent his days more quietly now, reflecting on the past and pondering the future. As winter blanketed the village in snow, Igor often looked at the barren oak tree, thinking about the last leaf and what it had symbolized. He realized that, like the leaf, each person, in their own way, clings to their beliefs, their hopes, their dreams, until the very end, regardless of the storms they face. And in this realization, Igor found a strange sense of peace, the peace of understanding that life, with all its changes, joys, and sorrows, was a cycle, much like the seasons, where each end was but a prelude to a new beginning.